Okay, so the requirements for the final are as follows, and this is on the blog as of now, obviously. So the grading for the final, there's four kind of metrics that I'm using, and it's worth the equivalent of 3 homework grades, which is weird and arbitrary feeling. Usually I value it at 4, but we have less class time, so I'm taking the weight of this final off a little bit. There's 2 technical grades that I'm assessing, or 2 technical metrics. One is that whoops, I didn't update that from last semester. You're demonstrating 2 of the 12 animation principles, and those are listed below. Those include, movement and arcs, stretch and squash, slow in and out. These are things that are ways of showing off naturalism in motion, like sort of a natural world, real world physics. And that these things are, apply to any kind of way that you're animating, any platform, whether it's stop motion, hand drawn animation, or any sort of digital animating process. So these are the kind of like larger principles of animation that the sort of Disney animators, Frank Oz and Frank, for their name, Wally Thomas and Frank whatever, sort of described in their book, The Illusion of Life, from 1985. Then secondly, I want to see a range of techniques, of like technical ways of making animation in Adobe Animate. So the techniques are things that are in the process of animating with our tool, which is the application. So motion tweens would be one of those ways of animating. So if you're exploring a range of the different approaches to animating that we've used in the application throughout the semester, this will give you a good grade. So if you're doing some frame-by-frame animating, if you do a motion tween, if you do an animation that's sort of nested within a symbol, if you're using the camera tool, if you're you're trying out all these different things, that will show a kind of range of conversance with the software. So that's a part of the grade as well. Then there's 2 kind of storytelling grades, and one is simply the effective syncing of the visuals to the audio, and really how like the visuals are in conversation with the audio in addition to that. But you kind of exercise that skill or that technical expression in the midterm, that abstract assignment to the audio recording. Then the second part of that is going to be just like storytelling considerations. How thoughtful are your compositions, the way you're framing scenes, your use of zooms in different ways of giving emphasis to the certain important storytelling details from scene to scene. Just how efficiently you're communicating your story, and how effectively you're telling this story in terms of narrative beats and just the emotional feel for the whole thing. So that's a little bit more open-ended, and just a kind of measure of your abilities as a designer and storyteller. So those are the different metrics. And today when we meet one-on-one, I'm happy to talk to you about how I feel you're doing on each of these metrics. So then, just to follow up on that, I just want to go through quickly the process of exporting. There's a couple things I'd like you to check, a couple of check boxes before actually doing the exporting. So let me open this. There's my never to be finished example, the cat animation. Okay, yeah. Okay, so here's my animation. What you want to do throughout is you want to test your animation to just see how it plays, make sure everything's working more or less, and you can do that at any point by going to Control Test, and that will more or less play through. It exports a version of this file in its native vector-based graphics, and you just want to watch it play through all the scenes to make sure that everything feels right. There's a couple of additional options that you'll want to check, because when you do this export, you'll notice often that the sound quality is really poor on export, and you'll also notice that certain hidden layers that you were working on that were part of your process, but you didn't want to be visible on export, will show up. And we've gone through that before. By default, Animate makes everything that's hidden revealed, and so we want to turn that off. So a couple things about the sound. One thing you want to do before you're going to export is you want to go through all of your scenes and just, I'll get up the scene menu again. Make sure that the audio is being translated properly. For me, my audio, when I import it, it just defaults to the right kind of syncing or the way it translates the audio. And probably you've done this throughout. This is something that people had difficulties with, understandably, during the midterm. So when you click on your audio layer in a scene, the properties panel will bring up the options for that. And so you want to go down to sync, and you want to make sure it's on stream. And you probably already did that, so you could kind of scrub through and actually sync the visuals up really effectively, or start it at any point in the timeline and have the audio play. Some people will have it automatically set to event, and that doesn't give you the scrubbing or play from any point in the timeline option. So make sure every one of your scenes has your audio, has your audio set to stream. So just go through scene by scene by scene, save your file, and then you want to also do this setting. You want to go to File, Publish Settings, and you want to make sure, under the Publish Settings, you want to make sure that your audio stream and audio event are set to high quality. So just do best, and then the bit rate, I would just set it to the highest setting, 160 kbps. Audio doesn't add a lot to the size of the file, so I would just do it. Have your best quality. Even if your recording is crap, you don't want it to be further compressing it upon export. It'll just sound like garbage. So even if your recording's garbage to begin with, don't preserve what quality you can on export. Oh yeah, and there's one other publish setting. So one other thing I'd like you probably want to, if it doesn't affect you, it doesn't really matter, but another publish setting is include hidden layers. Typically you want to turn that off because anything you already have hidden, you probably don't want to just appear upon export. Nothing else really applies to us. So once you do that, you're going to go to File. Once you're all ready, you've previewed everything looks perfect, you're going to go to File, Export, Export Video Media. And so we're going to change things from vector-based graphics and convert it to pixel-based graphics into a format that's more conventionally, sort of passed around and used as viewed as a movie file. So you can just leave these settings as they are. We're going to want to render it the same size you've been working on it. We're going to do the entire movie, and we can just leave it at that. And then yeah, we'll just leave it at that. So export, and what's going to happen is it's going to do a mini, an export of this at full size, and then it's going to bring up Adobe Media Encoder, which is a kind of helper application that all of the Adobe Creative Cloud uses to help package and export, compress, primarily movies, but also like audio and images some of the time. So it might take a minute. I don't think this is going to take very long. So the original export, if you have a lot of outside images and material, and you have a lot of motion tweens and shape tweens and a lot of computational things that are happening in your project, it might take a few minutes to do this. Usually it's going to be a minute or under. So, give it time to do its initial export. And once it does that, it's going to bring up on its own Adobe Media Encoder. If you don't have that downloaded, you might want to download that from Creative Cloud. You don't have to have it downloaded. You should be able to do a render without it, just in Adobe Animate. But the size of the file is going to be much larger, harder to manage, harder to upload. For a 30-second animation, you could be looking at if you don't compress it through a media encoder, you could be looking at 1 gigabyte in file size, 500 megabytes. Once we put it through the encoder and compress it as an MP4 using the H.264 codec, it's going to be more manageable. And I'm not going to get into the weeds with this. Usually I talk about compression and codecs versus the kind of file type that's sort of the wrapping. But a codec is sort of like the language that your file is interpreted into, and different codecs compress, differently, are sort of written in different languages. And our codec or compressor is H.264. Then the wrapper or the sort of file type, just the the extension at the end of your file name, is going to be .mp4, which is, and both of these are like maybe the most popular forms of compression and file type or wrapper. So we're just going to leave it with the automatic settings. So this is Adobe Media Encoder, and there's a lot you can do here. If you want to kind of explore your settings, you can click on that on the settings there, the match source high bit rate, and you can kind of play with how much you want to export and the file size that you want to export to. There's a lot of presets here, but typically we just go for matching the source, and then you can choose high or medium or low bit rate. There you go. But you don't have to touch any of that stuff. What you do want to touch is the output file, so that you can actually name it and where it's going to export to. For some reason, my export folder is always set to this folder, and so I want to move it to here, to wherever I know where to retrieve it, and then you can just press the green play button. And since you've already exported it once from Animate, this process should not take very long. It should take a minute or so, and you can kind of see it processing. And then once you have that fully exported, you can just upload that to the 2D animation folder, and I can manage it from there. That will be, once you have it uploaded to our shared folder, then I'm considering that submitted. You're fully compliant. So that is that. And anyone who has missed a lot of assignments or something has the opportunity also to do some makeups. And I'll expect those to be due by class time next week as well. If anyone wants to talk to me about having an extension, we can also talk about that. Most people are in good standing and have turned in most of their assignments. I'm going to allow three missed assignments with no repercussions, and I'm pretty, I'm being pretty open about missed classes and that kind of thing, especially after we've started distancing. So if you've missed 3 or less homework assignments throughout the course, you shouldn't have to worry. You can kind of just turn in the final, and we're good. And I'll follow after next week with with feedback on your final, written feedback, and then your overall grades. So let me just stop recording.